The massive Crux warship emerged from hyperspace near Earth's orbit, its dark metallic hull reflecting the distant sunlight. Inside, Commander Rex stood at the bridge, his heavily armored form towering over 3 meters tall. The thick plates covering his body were a testament to his species' evolution on a high-gravity world where even the rain could kill. "Another death world," he growled, studying the blue planet on the main screen. "Though this one seems peculiar." The Crux had conquered half the galaxy, their natural armor and incredible strength making them unstoppable. Every species they encountered either surrendered or fell. Their home planet, with its crushing gravity and hostile environment, had shaped them into what they believed were the ultimate warriors. "Sir," reported Officer Tom, his armor creaking as he moved, "the atmospheric readings are strange. The gravity is only 1 g, but the planet shows signs of complex life." Rex laughed, the sound echoing through his helmet. "Impossible. No advanced species could evolve in such weak gravity." But the scans didn't lie. The planet below teemed with life, and even more surprisingly, showed signs of advanced civilization. The Crux detected cities, satellites, and evidence of space exploration. When the humans responded to their communication request, Rex expected to see monstrous creatures. Instead, the screen showed a being so small and fragile-looking that several Crux officers laughed out loud. The human introduced himself as James Walker, Earth's diplomatic representative. He stood straight, wearing a simple blue suit, his face showing no fear despite facing creatures 3 times his size. "Welcome to Earth," James said calmly. "We've been expecting first contact for some time." Rex stepped forward, his heavy footsteps making the deck plates groan. "You are the dominant species of this world." "We are," James replied, still maintaining his composure. The Crux commander studied the human carefully. No natural armor, no visible weapons, not even basic environmental protection. How had such weak creatures survived? "We request permission to send a delegation to your planet," Rex stated, certain that closer inspection would reveal the humans' secret weapons or hidden strengths. James smiled. "Of course, we've prepared landing coordinates and a welcome ceremony." When the Crux delegation landed their shuttle, they were surprised again. The gravity was indeed light, making them feel almost bouncy, but the air was thick with oxygen, more than they'd ever encountered on a habitable world. "How do you prevent constant fires?" asked Officer Tom, checking his readings again. "Our atmosphere evolved with our planet," James explained as he led them toward a large building. "We've adapted to it." The Crux delegation watched in amazement as humans moved around them, going about their daily lives without environmental suits or protective gear. Children played in an open area nearby, their small bodies moving with surprising speed and agility. "This is impossible," Rex muttered to his second-in-command. "They're exposed to solar radiation, atmospheric corrosives, and biological contaminants. How are they surviving?" James overheard the comment. "We've evolved to handle our environment, just as you evolved to handle yours." The delegation entered a large conference room where other human leaders waited. Rex noticed something disturbing. None of the humans seemed intimidated by the Crux's massive size or fearsome appearance. As the initial diplomatic discussions began, Rex found himself growing increasingly uneasy. These humans were different from any species they'd encountered. They showed no fear, no submission, and spoke as equals despite their apparent physical weakness. At the end of the meeting, James made an announcement that would change everything. "We would like to propose a series of friendly competitions to demonstrate our respective species' capabilities." Rex's warrior instincts sparked with interest. Finally, a chance to prove Crux superiority. "We accept," he declared, certain of victory. As the humans smiled and began discussing details, Rex failed to notice the knowing looks they exchanged. He had no way of knowing that this simple diplomatic meeting was about to lead the Crux Empire to a shocking revelation about what truly made a species strong. The universe was about to learn why humans were far more dangerous than they appeared. The Great Hall of the United Earth Embassy buzzed with tension as representatives from both species gathered to discuss the details of the competition. The massive Crux warriors stood along one wall, their armor gleaming under the bright lights, while human diplomats and military officials occupied the other side. Commander Rex stepped forward, his heavy footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet room. "We propose 3 survival challenges," he announced. "Each will test the limits of our species' capabilities." James Walker nodded, maintaining the same calm demeanor that had unsettled the Crux during their first meeting. "What are your terms?" 3 planets, 3 different extreme environments," Rex explained. "Each challenge will last 7 planetary rotations. The winner is whoever survives the longest or completes the objectives first." The human representatives huddled together, discussing quietly among themselves. Rex watched them with amusement, noting how small and fragile they looked in their formal wear. After a few minutes, James turned back to face the Crux delegation. "We accept," he said, "and we have chosen our champion." A side door opened, and a human male walked in. Mark Stone stood at average height for his species, wearing simple tactical clothing. His body was lean and athletic, but to the Crux, he looked absurdly weak compared to their own champion. Rex laughed, the sound booming through his helmet. "This is your chosen warrior. He wouldn't survive 1 day on our homeworld." Mark stepped forward, his eyes studying the Crux with professional interest rather than fear. "I was a survival instructor for 15 years, he said quietly. "I've trained in every environment Earth has to offer." "Earth?" Rex scoffed. "Your gentle world hardly qualifies as training for what's to come." James interrupted smoothly. "And who will represent the Crux Empire?" Rex placed his armored hand on the shoulder of an even larger Crux warrior. "Commander Bolt, undefeated in combat and survival challenges across 17 systems." Bolt stepped forward, towering over Mark. His armor bore the scars of countless battles, and the weaponry integrated into his suit hummed with deadly energy. "I look forward to demonstrating true Deathworld superiority," he rumbled. The human representatives showed no reaction to the intimidating display. Instead, they began discussing the practical details: rules of engagement, permitted equipment, and emergency protocols. Each challenger will be allowed basic survival gear appropriate to their species, James explained. "No advanced weapons, no communication devices except for emergency beacons." Rex agreed, confident in their victory. The first challenge begins in 3 days on the ice world of Frost Prime. Temperature averages -100 degrees, gravity at 2 Earth standards, and constant methane storms. To everyone's surprise, Mark smiled. "Sounds like winter in Antarctica, just a bit colder." The Crux warriors exchanged confused looks. They had expected the human to show at least some concern about the extreme conditions. As the meeting concluded, Bolt approached Mark, looming over him. "You show either great courage or great foolishness, tiny one." Mark looked up at the massive warrior, still smiling. "There's an old Earth saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." The Crux translator struggled with the idiom, but Bolt got the message. "We shall see who has more fight when you're freezing in Frost Prime's endless night." As the delegates filed out of the hall, Rex pulled Bolt aside. "Don't underestimate them," he warned. "There's something strange about these humans. They're too confident." Bolt flexed his armored fingers. "They're soft creatures who've never known true hardship. This contest will show them what real strength means." Neither Crux warrior noticed James and Mark watching them from across the room. The human diplomat turned to his champion with a questioning look. "What do you think, Mark?" "They're strong, well-armored, and adapted to harsh conditions," Mark replied thoughtfully. "But they rely too much on their natural advantages. They've forgotten that survival isn't just about being the strongest." James nodded. "Show them what humans can do." "Oh, I will," Mark said, his eyes gleaming with determination. They're about to learn that humanity didn't become Earth's apex predator by accident. The surface of Frost Prime was a nightmare of swirling methane storms and ice crystals, sharp enough to cut through steel. 2 transport ships descended through the turbulent atmosphere, each carrying a champion to their designated drop zones 50 kilometers apart. Mark Stone stood in the airlock of his transport, double-checking his specialized environmental suit. Unlike the bulky armor of the Crux, his suit was sleek and flexible, designed by Earth's best engineers for maximum mobility. "Remember," James said through the comm, "you have 7 days to reach the extraction point. The methane storms will interfere with tracking, so you'll be mostly on your own." Mark nodded, just like that training exercise in Greenland, but with better scenery. The airlock opened, and bitter cold rushed in despite his suit's protection. Mark stepped out onto the frozen surface, immediately activating his suit's magnetic grips to counter the doubled gravity. The transport disappeared into the dark sky, leaving him alone in the howling storm. Miles away, Bolt emerged from his transport, his massive form barely affected by the planet's gravity. His natural armor, combined with his environmental suit, made him nearly invulnerable to the harsh conditions. "This will be too easy," he growled into his comm. "The human will be dead before the first day ends." Both challengers had the same objective: reach the extraction point on the other side of a massive ice canyon. Between them lay frozen methane lakes, razor-sharp ice forests, and temperatures cold enough to freeze oxygen solid. Mark started moving immediately, his suit's sensors mapping the safest path forward. Unlike Bolt, who could power through obstacles, Mark needed to be smart about conservation of energy. The doubled gravity meant every step required twice the effort. Hours passed. The constant storms reduced visibility to mere meters. Mark discovered that the ice beneath his feet had different densities. Some areas were solid enough to walk on, while others would crack and plunge him into freezing methane lakes below. He developed a system, testing each step with his ice pick before moving forward. It was slow but steady progress. Meanwhile, Bolt was growing frustrated. His superior strength meant nothing when the ground kept breaking beneath him. His third fall into a methane lake had damaged part of his armor's heating system. "Impossible," he muttered, watching his suit's temperature gauge dropping. How could anyone evolve in such conditions? Back at the monitoring station, Rex and James watched their champion's progress through intermittent sensor data. "Your human moves strangely," Rex observed. "Why does he waste time testing the ground?" James smiled. "Because on Earth, those who rush in without thinking don't survive long." By the end of the first day, both challengers had covered significant ground, but in very different ways. Bolt had moved in straight lines, powering through obstacles and dealing with the consequences. Mark had zigzagged across the terrain, using natural formations as shelter and carefully mapping safe passages. The second day brought a new challenge: a massive methane storm that turned the ice crystals in the air into deadly projectiles. Bolt tried to push through it, his armor taking heavy damage. Mark, however, quickly dug a snow cave and waited it out, using the time to rest and plan his next move. "The human is hiding," Rex sneered, "like a prey animal." "No," James corrected, "he's adapting." There's a difference. As the third day dawned, both challengers made a shocking discovery. The ice canyon they needed to cross was wider than expected, nearly 2 kilometers across. Bolt stared at it in frustration, knowing even his powerful frame couldn't jump that far. But Mark saw something different. He noticed how the methane storms had created massive ice formations, natural bridges spanning parts of the canyon. They looked fragile, but with careful weight distribution. "Impossible," Rex whispered, watching Mark begin his preparations. "He's not going to." James leaned forward, watching his champion work. "You're about to see why humans are the most successful species on Earth. We don't just survive, we solve problems." The real test was about to begin. Mark studied the ice formations stretching across the canyon. While Bolt was still searching for a way around, Mark had already started implementing his plan. Using the ice pick and some spare cable from his survival kit, he fashioned a crude but effective harness system. "The human is attempting something," Rex reported, watching the grainy sensor feed. "But in this gravity, any fall would be fatal." James remained silent, trusting his champion's judgment. Mark began his crossing, moving like a spider across the underside of the ice bridge. The doubled gravity actually helped here. It meant better contact with his magnetic grips. Each movement was careful and planned, distributing his weight evenly to prevent the ice from cracking. Bolt watched from his position, initially amused but gradually growing concerned. The human was making steady progress while he was still stuck trying to find a safe crossing point. "Impossible," Bolt growled. "Their world is soft. How do they know these techniques?" The answer, of course, lay in Earth's history. Humans had conquered every environment on their planet, from the highest mountains to the deepest oceans. Ice climbing was just one of countless skills they'd developed over millennia of exploration. Halfway across the canyon, disaster struck. A particularly violent methane storm hit the ice bridge, causing parts of it to crack. Mark found himself hanging by one cable, the doubled gravity threatening to tear his arms from their sockets. In the monitoring station, even Rex held his breath. But what happened next changed his understanding of humans forever. Instead of panicking, Mark swung himself like a pendulum, building momentum. At the peak of his swing, he released the cable and grabbed onto a lower ice formation. The movement was smooth, practiced, the result of countless hours of climbing in Earth's varied terrains. "He's using the gravity to his advantage," Rex realized, amazement creeping into his voice. James nodded. "Humans don't fight nature. We work with it." Meanwhile, Bolt had finally found a crossing point, a narrow ledge that curved around the canyon wall. His powerful frame and natural armor should have made it easy, but the ice was treacherous. Every step had to be perfect. The next few hours became a study in contrasting approaches. Mark continued his methodical crossing, using minimal energy and letting physics do most of the work. Bolt pushed forward with brute force, his frustration growing with each careful step. "This is not warfare," Bolt complained through his comm. "This is irritating." But it was warfare, just not the kind the Crux understood. This was humanity's war, fought not with strength but with ingenuity and adaptation. Mark reached the other side first, his suit covered in ice but systems still functioning perfectly. He had crossed using less energy than Bolt had expended in his first few steps along the ledge. The Crux warrior finally made it across an hour later, his armor showing signs of stress from the constant battle against gravity and cold. He found Mark already setting up a shelter, using the ice itself as insulation. Bolt began, then stopped, reassessing the human. "How did you know those techniques?" Mark looked up from his work. "Earth has places like this. Not as extreme, but similar enough. We learned long ago that fighting nature head-on is a losing battle." The next 3 days of the challenge revealed more surprises. Mark's efficient movement and resource management meant he had plenty of supplies left. Bolt, having damaged much of his equipment early on, found himself struggling more with each passing hour. In the monitoring station, Rex watched with growing unease. Their weakness, it forced them to become clever. "Not weakness," James corrected. "Adaptability. Every challenge humanity faced made us stronger, not through changing our bodies, but by improving our minds." As the extraction point came into view on the final day, both champions had learned valuable lessons. But while Bolt had merely survived the experience, Mark had thrived. The Crux were beginning to understand that true strength came in many forms, and perhaps they had underestimated these seemingly fragile creatures from Earth. The universe was about to learn even more surprising lessons about humanity's capabilities. The second challenge took place on Magma 3, a volcanic world where rivers of molten rock flowed freely and toxic gases filled the air. The Crux were certain this would be their victory. No soft-bodied species could possibly survive such extremes. They were wrong. Mark Stone stood at the edge of a lava field, his modified suit reflecting the intense heat. Behind him lay the path he'd taken, a careful route using the cooled volcanic rock as stepping stones. Ahead, through the shimming air, he could see his next objective, a dormant volcanic cone that held the extraction point. Bolt, now sporting repaired armor, watched the human from his position across the lava field. The first challenge had shaken his confidence, but surely this environment would prove too harsh for the Earth creature. Our bodies evolved to withstand extreme heat, Bolt transmitted to his commanders. The human will cook inside that suit. But Mark had already started moving, using a technique that left Bolt stunned. Instead of trying to power through the heat like the Crux warrior, Mark was timing his movements between the thermal vents. He would sprint forward when the heat dropped, then take cover in the shadow of cooled rock formations when the temperature spiked. In the monitoring station, Rex watched with growing unease. How are they doing this? Their world is nothing like this place. James smiled. Ever heard of Death Valley or the Danakil Desert? Humans have been living in extreme heat for thousands of years. As hours turned into days, both challengers faced different problems. Bolt's armor, designed for high pressure and impact, struggled with the constant heat stress. Systems began to fail, forcing him to shut down non-essential functions. Mark, however, maintained a steady pace. His suit, while less protective, was more efficient at heat management. He treated the challenge like a marathon, not a sprint. On the fourth day, Bolt made a critical mistake. Frustrated by the human's progress, he tried to cross a seemingly solid lava crust. The surface broke, nearly sending him into the molten rock below. Impossible, he roared, barely managing to pull himself back. How does the human know which paths are safe? The answer came from Mark himself, who had witnessed the incident through the heat haze. We study volcanoes on Earth. The patterns are similar. You just have to know what to look for. This revelation hit the Crux observers hard. Humans hadn't just survived their world. They had studied it, understood it, learned its secrets. As the fifth day dawned, Mark demonstrated another uniquely human trait that horrified the Crux: persistence hunting. When a massive native creature blocked his path, Mark didn't fight it. Instead, he followed it, keeping his distance, waiting for it to tire or make a mistake. This is not combat, Rex protested, watching the feed. He's stalking it. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, James explained. We can't outfight most predators, but we can outlast them. Hour after hour, Mark maintained his pursuit. The creature, despite its size and strength, eventually collapsed from heat exhaustion. Mark simply walked past it, conserving his energy for the challenges ahead. By the sixth day, Bolt was showing signs of stress. His species' natural advantages had become limitations in this environment. Their heavy armor and strength required massive energy expenditure, while Mark's lighter frame and efficient movement allowed him to conserve resources. They're not just surviving, Rex realized, watching Mark methodically work his way up the volcanic cone. They're using everything around them. Every challenge makes them adapt. James nodded. That's humanity's greatest strength. We don't just endure, we learn, adapt, and overcome. As the challenge neared its end, the Crux were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their belief in pure physical supremacy had blinded them to other forms of strength. The humans' apparent weakness had forced them to develop something perhaps more valuable: adaptability. The final challenge would reveal even more surprising truths about Earth's children and the true meaning of being a Deathworlder. For the final challenge, the Crux made what they thought was a clever choice: Earth itself. They believed their superior strength would give them an advantage even in the humans' home environment. They couldn't have been more wrong. The challenge zone was set in a dense rainforest. Bolt stood at his drop point, feeling uncomfortably light in Earth's gravity. His massive armor, designed for worlds with much stronger gravitational pull, now felt clumsy and awkward. This gravity is pathetic, he complained, stumbling as he tried to walk. How can anything evolve to be strong in such weakness? A kilometer away, Mark moved through the forest like a ghost. Here, in his natural environment, he didn't need expensive equipment or special suits. A simple set of camouflage clothes and basic survival gear were all he carried. The objective was simple: capture the opponent's flag while defending your own. A basic military exercise, or so the Crux thought. In the observation post, Rex watched with growing concern as his champion struggled. Something is wrong. His movements are too heavy, too unstable. James nodded. Your bodies are adapted to high gravity. Here, every movement has less resistance than you expect. It's like trying to write while wearing thick gloves. The first day revealed more surprises. Bolt's armor, so effective on other worlds, began to malfunction in Earth's humid atmosphere. The dense vegetation caught in his joints, and the unfamiliar terrain made every step treacherous. Mark, meanwhile, seemed to flow through the forest. He climbed trees with ease, used vines as natural ropes, and moved without disturbing so much as a leaf. Years of military training combined with an instinctive understanding of his home environment made him nearly invisible. Where is he? Bolt demanded, his sensors failing to detect the human through the thick canopy. This forest is alive. Everything moves. Everything makes noise. That was another aspect the Crux hadn't considered. Earth's ecosystem was incredibly complex, with millions of species all interacting in ways their sensors couldn't interpret. Mark used this to his advantage, letting natural sounds mask his movement. On the second day, Bolt faced a new challenge: Earth's weather. A tropical storm moved in, turning the forest floor into mud and filling the air with lightning. His heavy armor, now more hindrance than help, started to sink into the soft ground. Their world actively fights against us, he transmitted to Rex. Even the rain feels wrong. Mark had anticipated the weather, using it to mask his approach to Bolt's position. The Crux warrior's technological advantages meant nothing when lightning interfered with his sensors, and the rain obscured his vision. By the third day, Bolt was exhausted. Earth's gravity might be lower, but the constant adjustment required for every movement drained his energy. His species had evolved for brief, powerful actions in high gravity, not this constant, precise control. Now you understand. Mark's voice came through the comm, seemingly from everywhere and nowhere. Earth didn't make us strong by giving us armor or powerful muscles. It made us strong by forcing us to adapt. The fourth day brought the final confrontation. Bolt, struggling to defend his flag, heard nothing until Mark was already there. The human appeared like a shadow, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for a weak species. How? Bolt demanded, his movements too exaggerated in the low gravity to respond effectively. How are you doing this? Mark secured both flags before answering. This is our world. Every plant, every animal, every weather pattern. We grew up understanding them all. We don't need natural armor because we learned to use our environment as protection. In the observation post, Rex finally understood. The humans weren't weak. They were efficient. Every movement, every decision was based on millions of years of evolution in this complex, ever-changing world. Their strength, he realized, isn't in their bodies. It's in their ability to adapt to anything. James smiled. And you haven't even seen our cities yet. The final challenge had proven something significant. Earth wasn't just another death world. It was the ultimate testing ground, and its children were its masterpiece. But the biggest revelation was still to come. After the challenges, the Crux delegation was invited to tour Earth's major cities. What they saw shattered their remaining preconceptions about humanity. Rex and Bolt stood atop a skyscraper in New York, watching humans move through the concrete canyons below. The sheer scale of human adaptation overwhelmed them. These supposedly weak creatures had built artificial mountains of steel and glass, created climate-controlled environments, and mastered their world in ways the Crux had never imagined. You build your own mountains, Rex said in awe. You reshape entire landscapes. James nodded. We couldn't survive everywhere naturally, so we learned to change our environment instead of waiting for evolution to change us. The revelation continued as they toured Earth's various biomes. In a single day, they witnessed humans thriving in the Arctic cold, desert heat, mountain heights, and ocean depths. Each environment showcased different human adaptations, not physical changes, but technological and behavioral ones. Your species lives everywhere, Bolt observed, watching a submarine surface in the Pacific. No other world we've encountered has life in so many different environments. Earth isn't just a death world, Mark explained. It's thousands of different worlds in one. Every environment here tried to kill us, so we learned to survive them all. In the Amazon rainforest, the Crux witnessed indigenous tribes living in harmony with one of the most complex ecosystems in the galaxy. In the Sahara, they saw solar farms harnessing the deadly desert sun for power. Each location showed humans not just surviving, but thriving in conditions that should have been impossible. But how? Rex asked, watching children play in a park. Your bodies are so fragile. James smiled. That's exactly why we succeeded. Our fragility forced us to become smart. We couldn't outfight the predators, so we learned to outthink them. We couldn't survive the cold, so we invented ways to stay warm. Every weakness became a reason to grow stronger. The final piece of the puzzle came when the Crux reviewed Earth's historical records. They learned about the multiple extinction events that had nearly wiped out life on Earth, about the rapid climate changes, about the countless predators and diseases that had shaped human evolution. Your entire history is one of survival, Rex said, reading about the ice ages. Every few thousand years, your world tries to kill you in a new way. And each time, we adapt, Mark replied. We've faced everything from giant predators to microscopic viruses. Earth taught us that strength isn't about being the biggest or toughest. It's about being able to change. The Crux delegation's final report to their empire changed everything. Earth wasn't just another death world. It was the Death World, a planet that had thrown every possible challenge at its inhabitants, creating a species that could adapt to anything. We thought we were the ultimate warriors because our world made us strong, Rex admitted in the closing ceremony. But Earth did something far more impressive. It made you clever. James and Mark stood with the Crux leaders as a new alliance was formed. The humans' ability to adapt and solve problems complemented the Crux's natural strength. Together, they would be unstoppable. There's an old Earth saying, James told the assembled delegates, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Earth tried to kill us countless times, in countless ways. Each time, we came back stronger, smarter, more adaptable. As the Crux ships prepared to leave Earth's orbit, Rex had one final question for Mark. After seeing your world, after understanding what shaped your species, what scares humans? Mark thought for a moment before answering. Nothing and everything. We fear, but we don't let fear stop us. That's another lesson Earth taught us. There's always a way to adapt, to overcome, to survive. The Crux left Earth with a new understanding of what it meant to be strong. Their physical power was impressive, but humanity's adaptability was something else entirely. They had encountered the true ultimate Deathworlders, a species that didn't just survive challenges, but learned from them, grew stronger because of them. Earth wasn't just a death world. It was the universe's greatest training ground, and humanity was its proudest achievement. The end.